Hey, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Big Bear Film Festival, and I'm here sitting with David and Urban, and they have got a new film called Unknown. Well, it's new. It's been out for a while. It's funny how it grows and gets traction. It's called Father Unknown, and I'm sure now, as a filmmaker myself, and have produced a documentary produced solely by myself, the finances are incredible when you actually look at what is spent. But also, people keep wanting to go, "Hey, can you add that thing?" Or maybe we should change that up. I can't imagine how many versions you've been through. Go ahead and tell me, how many times have you watched it?
Yeah, well, that's a different question. We lost track of the number of versions. It's for a while we would create a DVD of a version, and when we were done with that, we'd put it on one of those spindles where you put your DVDs, and then the new version would get created. And so it's like an archaeological record of just versions of DVDs. It's probably 50. And the reason that it's so high, I mean, I think a lot of filmmakers go through this, but we would do something kind of interesting. We've screened it in a lot of places with a lot of live audiences. And what we would do is during the audience conversation afterwards, people have a lot to say and a lot of questions. And you love to hear the positive comments, but if somebody would say, I didn't understand why this person, who was this person, whatever they would say that was confusing, we would take that to heart and say, what can we do to make this more clear? What can we do to make this more articulate? And that would cause another version. So it's been tested and screened in front of a lot of audiences where we were there, and that caused us to work on it a lot.
Yes, I can't tell you how many times I had to watch my own, and of course, months would go by, and then I'd have to watch it again, and I'd be like, I could have changed that. Oh, that needs to be. Never mind. Just burn it and put it in the stack. I know what you mean.
Yeah, that's right.
And with all the social media going on, did you ever feel the need to continue the journey? Maybe like when you do these recordings, like you know what, I'll start a YouTube, and maybe you have, and I haven't researched enough, but start a YouTube channel and start putting these people's viewings and questions, the Q&As during the screenings and so forth.
We've done a little bit of that. There's been so much travel, and it's typically been my dad and myself, and a lot of times my mom will come, and we don't have the technical staff to be able to record it the way we would like. But we've done some of it, and those conversations are always really interesting. People seem to have a lot of similar stories in their family that relate to this, and so very interesting to hear other people's versions.
And of course, just when you think DVD and Blu-ray is dead, it just comes back. Hey, send them another Blu-ray. I actually had a project, and they were like, "Hey, can you make I had to go and look at my stack. This is the smallest stack that I have of blank. Who knows what it is?
Yeah.
And man, I can't imagine all the different formats that you're experiencing now, but also when you're in the DVD process. Because I was in it this morning, the audio tracks of the different languages. Did you have a lot of translation? I'm sure. And did you have to hand type the? Oh my gosh! So Urban, did you help with the translation and the text?
No.
Wow. Who did it?
My son.
No kidding, David. You.
Well, that's actually not. No, because I'm not a fluent Swiss language speaker. You see in the film that when we arrive in Switzerland, my dad is the kind of connection between English and Swiss German. And so he's the translator in the film, and a lot of times that's happening very quickly. And his Swiss language ability really kind of stopped at 12 years old when he came to America. So you're really having a 12-year-old language speaker in an adult man's body be your link to this story and what's happening. So you have that kind of going on when we were on this trip to Switzerland. And so, after we came back, all of this had been recorded. there's a lot of confusion, and a lot of times he wasn't fully sure what was being said. So we brought in a fluent Swiss language speaker who sat down with a transcription person, and they went through every spoken word, including all of the material that you don't use in the film, because until you really know what's being said and what's happening, you can't decide if it's relevant to the story or not. So you translate a lot.
So you must have done the transcription prior to editing because you really wanted to know what you had.
Yeah. Obviously there were some moments that were very evident what was happening, and my dad had a clear enough understanding that we knew that this was going to be in the film. When he's talking to his brother on the phone for the first time, we know that's going to be in the film, and when they meet, we know that's going to be in the film. But there's a lot of nuance in language, and you really want to know what is being said. So it was a lot of work.
And how long did the production last? How long did it take?
Do you mean the trip itself or the post production?
Let's do the trip and or the coverage. Yeah.
So the trip was 10 days, and we never, I didn't set out to make a film at all. This was recorded on an iPhone 3.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
not, you'd never, because you're a filmmaker, you never would make a film on an iPhone. You might do it on an iPhone 11 or something today.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't try it on an iPhone 3, and you certainly wouldn't do it by yourself. If you had even a concept for even a small documentary, you would take at least one other person, and then you take 10 other people. So,
but then the other thing was there any moments where, because I know those phones back in the day, it's like they would just cut out, and they were like, they'll stop recording.
And you don't know what's going to happen. So I would record. I'd wake up. I would record all sorts of stuff that you don't know how relevant it is to the story, because you're really living the story and you don't totally understand what that is. So I would record most of the day, and then my phone would fill up, and I would grab my dad's phone or a little digital elf camera he had, and I would record until that filled up, and then I would grab, we had 2 or 3 not good cameras that I just would cycle through, and by the end of the day, they were all full, and so I would empty those onto my
laptop.
Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. And of course, I was thinking while I was watching, technology has come a long way. I've had to actually build a couple of 360 cameras, and it's very interesting because we're at that new era where we're grabbing everything around us instead of just focusing on different shots. And I thought, man, if you had one of those little tiny Insta 360s, you could get any angle you wanted, and you were very inconspicuous, especially the beginning. And that's another thing that really grabbed me about the film, is that you went into a family environment. It was very, it's not hostile, but it was just like they did not want to be pried out or videoed or anything. And the generation before us thinks this is going on the big screen all the time. And in our era, it's like there's so much content. When did you want to focus on this, or who's it exposed to? But the generation prior to us, it's like that's going on the movies, that's going on the news. I don't want any recording of me.
Right, right. And had somebody said, "What are you going to do with this?" I didn't have any sort of an answer. I just knew that what we were doing was really important.
Not to mention, not even a documentary, but for the family, the heirloom.
Exactly.
It's very interesting as a documentary person myself. My child's first day at school, I immediately hid the camera, recorded them for a good hour, and just say, "Oh, tell me what else happened. What did you see?" Because I want to remember what that was like. And now she can judge that to her child and see how it was on her first day, contrast and all the memories that you get lost. But so, Urban, I'd like to hear what you think about what your process was. All right, here's your son asking all these questions, and he's trying to convince you to go. And I know the film didn't really, it touched on it, but what made you want to go? What made you want to go investigate?
Well, let's put it this. Well, first of all, when I said David did the interpreting, uh, he explained that he did eventually hire someone that knew the language better than I did, and had the interpretation. So no, I didn't mean that he actually did it himself, but he. So that's what I meant. To answer your question, well, it really was my son that really made this whole trip possible, because he said, I would like to go and see where you grew up. I want to see the orphanage. And so he really is the one that reached out to me and said, would you like to go? I want to go. Um, you know, and so that's really what started this whole thing. And so I immediately got a hold of my uncles and said, um, we're going to be coming over there. Let's see, can we figure out some places to show David? And David says, I just want to go to the orphanage where you grew up. And it wasn't about visiting Switzerland. It was more about, he wanted to see my background, where I grew up and things like that. So that was very special.
And you were okay with that and you were thinking, well, why don't we go and see that? Let's go and see that.
Oh yeah, when you and your son, since we were not close as he was growing up, and you can see why now, by perhaps too. Um, to see my son reach out and want to do this, I mean, my heart just, there was no way I would say no. I mean, it was just, yeah, it was very special.
Something else happened that really became a very motivating factor to go, and that is that we discovered a man who had been a child in the orphanage with my dad at the same time, and that man is Sepp, who we eventually meet in the film. And so just the notion, somebody that my dad remembered from all those years before would be there, and that they could talk, and that he could share some of these memories, that was, for me, that's when I said, we absolutely have to go see. I want to see this man, not just the place, but the people who were there.
Yes, and what a great reunion that they had at I guess it's the castle, right? The castle?
We call it the castle. Yeah, that actually is a 700-year-old castle in Switzerland, if you can believe it. And so, when I was growing up, and my dad would say some things, these little tidbits about his childhood, he would always say, well, at the castle in Switzerland, we slaughtered the cows. So, just imagine being 5 years old or 7 years old, like I was, and you're hearing your dad talk about that, and you're like, what is he talking about? Like, what? A lot of times your dad would say, well, I threw a baseball with my dad and we were in Kansas, or some more typical American kind of a background. And so for a long time, when he would describe little pieces of his childhood, it just seemed like another world, almost like a fairy tale world or something like that.
And the silhouette reenactments, not only budget wise but just expressional wise, it helped me understand the presence. Thank goodness it wasn't, and I'm sure you were trying to scavenge for good B-roll that wasn't too far off and drifted the persons away psychologically of what you were trying to talk about. But the silhouette part was what was really great about it. And ironically, I kept regressing back to I'm literally the second gen off the farm, and my dad and his dad, they did not share time together very well. And the mother died at a young age, so there was a very at forces, at odds, and it kind of reminded me of that, because I don't know anything about what happened on that farm. I don't know all the stories, and then all of a sudden I'll get launched into a funeral of someone, a relative I've never even heard of or met, and now we all group together, and stuff just starts coming out.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there was a situation with y'all's development throughout the years, y'all's relationship, that it was always represented in society as being father and son, but it was more like you said, you did not know each other very well. You knew that you were related, and then came the father-son thing, but it really was flipped at certain spots, and it feels that way in the doc. It's like, let's switch scenarios. Did you ever feel that way, Urban? That there, now that y'all are kind of the same age in a mentality sense, that you were having that transition, like on that trip. I don't know. Is that something that I'm maybe I'm off bar?
No, no, no,
I
no.
don't think you are.
I think. Well, first of all, you're very good with expression. You're almost a little too far. I have to think a little bit. What's the man saying? If I understand you correctly, I think if you're saying what I just understood was, at times it really felt like David was the father, and he was providing and caring for me and watching over me and guiding me to be able to do all the things there at the door. You're right on. As a matter of fact, I bring that up, and that's probably not something that a son wants to hear, because he wants to look up to his father. And but that really was exactly how I felt. That that, and I'm not ashamed of it at all. I think it's the most precious thing that could have happened, and I needed that. And yeah, I think there are so many lines that you can see in the movie. I mean, it's very obvious that he's comforting me, and he's really being a father to me when I really needed it the most. Extremely. You
Yes.
really have very good perception of what's going on.
Very good.
You
Yeah,
do.
and such a dynamic story of generation and having to pass on the characteristics. There is that fold back, and my son's 10 years old. Hey, how many children do you have, David?
I have 3 kids.
Okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and Urban, was it the only child that you have is David, or was there another one? Okay, so wow,
Julie, our
Julie.
daughter. Yes. Mhm.
So now that it's 2020, do you have a regular time that you go back and or visit or Skype, or have you been over there since the doc?
Well, we were over there, obviously, when the movie was made. I have not been back since, but I do Skype with Willie, and we're a little bit overdue. And he was going to Skype, but he's had little issues come up. So one of these days we need to Skype again. I keep in contact with one of his sons, probably more than all the others. He has 4 sons, and he usually Skypes with me, or at least we do quite a bit of texting and then exchanging photos and things like that. So yeah, it's really neat.
And it's interesting that there's always someone in the family that is on the ancestry.com or has just researched the gamut of the. Would that be you, David, that you did that, or would it be someone else?
Yeah. Yeah. If I think if his background wasn't so outrageous in terms of the orphanage, a 700-year-old castle, all of this stuff, I don't know if I would be that person if circumstances were different. But because of this, yeah, I'm definitely that person. And before we went on the trip, I remember looking at ancestry.com. I mean, this is 15 years ago, so DNA didn't exist. It was a very a much less sophisticated attempt at genealogy. And we had nothing to go on. We had my grandmother's name, and we knew the names of a few other relatives, and it became a dead end very fast. But since then, since returning from the trip and having so much of what was kind of in the darkness be revealed, we have I would call it like a proper family tree now that has developed. And of course, it's got some, like most families, it's got some jaggedy branches and some, divorces and marriages and so forth. But we really have a much clearer picture of what happened to this family and how we got here.
Now, how is what's your eldest child right now? How old are they?
My son is 24.
Okay, so he must have kind of lived a little bit with this. How did he experience it? How did he watch it? What is he? He's not into it just yet, or
I mean, he's certainly. How old was he when this happened? So 90s.
He might have been 16 or no?
No, he was less than that. So 96. He was.
96.
He was 13.
Wow.
So he knew something, and then of course my other two children were younger. He's the oldest. He knew something very significant was happening to the family, because he could see, I think, the emotion on the faces of all of the adults, and we were talking about it a lot, and there was a lot of telling and retelling of this story. But I think, for many of us, the importance of family, the importance of where we come from, and who were my parents, and what stories shaped their lives, those sorts of things become more relevant as we get older, I think. And so my hunch is that as time goes on, as my kids get older, they'll be able to kind of return to this story because it's now known, and understand it in a way that was just simply impossible prior.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible. So, Urban, there was another question I was wanting to ask you about the castle and growing up there. That wasn't. I mean, you had to touch on a certain amount of stories that related to the journey in the documentary. But is there stories that we didn't hear? Like I remember there was girls that you were flirting with at a certain area in the castle, like that was known for, and how old were you during those the time that you had to leave? And if there's other story, is it still being used? Is the castle just a historical monument, or is it still being used as a foster home?
David can answer that. His wording is a little quicker and better than mine, but go ahead and do that, son.
The castle stopped being an orphanage in probably the late 80s or early 90s, and became transitioned to a facility for physically and mentally handicapped adults. And it's changed. The castle itself hasn't changed, but it's not people sleeping in rows of beds like we think of orphanages from years before. We got to see the way it's run today, and it's really quite amazing. It gives support to a lot of people and their families in that area, and they have a lot of activities that those people can participate in. For instance, there's beekeeping that happens at the castle, and some of those adults tend to the bees, harvest the honey. There's some wine making with grapes they grow in the area. And then they have a little store. There's a little market store attached to this castle. And so people in the local community can buy honey and wine and woven tapestries. And so it's a very, it's really neat to see it turn into something meaningful like that.
Some of them learned a little trade. I know one of them was learning, the ladies would learn how to iron, and then they could get ironing from the community. People bring their stuff in, and so they would learn to earn a little wage and things like that. I think the goal eventually was that once they learned a little trade here or there, how uh, to be able to do some kind of work, then eventually that they could go out into the world and be on their own. Um, it was interesting because some of that was all discussed in Swiss, and I thought it was very nice that they did had a program like that. Some of them did sleep there, but most of them it was just the training they got there, and then I guess I don't know, they went back somewhere else to sleep, but not all of them stayed there.
I see. And if I remember the film at the very beginning very very correctly, something about a straitjacket, or they had you in a straitjacket. Was that a thing, or was I just hearing things?
No, no, no. So I was actually in 3 different orphan homes. And I know that for a fact because my mom did tell me about the very first one. I know the name, and that's about it. The second one is where that happened, where they did put me in a straitjacket and tied me to a leg on the table. And it just that never. It's hard to. It just never resonated very well in my mind, and I don't think about it a lot, but every so often, I know somebody has asked me, "Well, why were you in a straitjacket?" And I'm going, "Yeah, why was I?" I don't have. Nobody ever told me, so I can only conclude I didn't quite perform the way they wanted me, and that was a way of punishing. I don't know for sure.
So can you tell me? And I just got the 10-minute warning on this silly Zoom thing. But Urban? Can you tell me some of the happiest moments that you had, whether it be free time going out in? I didn't know if you did any camping or if you were able to search the grounds or anything like that. Tell me something that was in your mind being a happy moment growing up in that area.
Whoa. And I have 9 minutes now. Boy, let's see. Happy. Well, first of all, I can tell you we didn't have any birthdays, so we didn't celebrate birthdays. I guess Easter and Christmas would be because we got to go out and they hid the Easter eggs were candy, hard candy. And it wasn't until much later that, the Easter bunnies, those are made out of chocolate. We did not have those. I remember taking eggs, real eggs, and putting grass around them, and then wrap something tight, and then you drop it in boiling water, and a beautiful pattern will go onto the egg. Very very pretty. So that I'm trying to think some other happy things. Oh, um, Oh, I loved the rhubarb pie that they had. I just enjoy that a lot. And meal times was always fun because I was always hungry. Um, um, since I didn't have a mother and father, I really don't know anything about I just went to the headmaster if I had a problem. That's a really interesting question. Nobody's ever asked that.
No, no.
Was there a Urban? Was there a challenge that you had? I know we got like 5 more minutes, but was there a challenge that you had that you felt when you were up? When you're like, where's my dad and where's my mom? Did you ever have that, or was it just like this is the way things are?
This is the way. Yeah, I didn't know any. I didn't know any different or any better. Now I look back and you can say, gee, well, why didn't you think about, everybody has a mother and father. All of that was totally unknown for me at that point in time. So I guess I just kind of existed, if you want to say that. And you went to school and class. We didn't have much class schooling anyway, because we were usually out in the field doing work if we could, or chop up wood and stack real nice and neat. And so I don't know if I'm answering your
No,
question.
that's it. No, that's very
They're
interesting.
interesting because I've not had those before.
Well,
I have to think a little bit. Go ahead,
I
Tom.
have a guess here, Dad. I don't know if this is true. Hang on just a second. But I wonder if that's really where you fell in love with nature and the outdoor world, because you were in it so much. And
Yeah.
it's not explained in the film, but this kid who barely went to school and grew up in an orphanage ended up coming to the United States. Uh, Ended up going to college, got a master's degree, and taught science for 30 years in one classroom in a little town in rural Colorado, where he taught about insects and bugs and nature. And so I think there's a parallel between being outside and being around insects and plants and this sort of thing when he was a kid and what became his career.
Amazing.
Boy, you really couldn't have hit it any better. Of all the books that I still have, that was my favorite subject. Naturkunde, a nature study. And that's neat that you picked up on that. I'm learning from my son an awful lot. Things that just happen, and now I mean, it's interesting. It's very true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it certainly definitely goes both ways. I've been feeling it the more and more. My son, he's 11. He turned 11 the other day, and I can feel that, especially with my dad. And I'll do a conference call like here, and he'll be on and telling us about a video game, and my dad's trying to talk about politics, and it's just interesting to see the gap that happens.
Yeah.
But man, it was really great having the time to talk to you guys. Is there other things that I can point to other than the Unknown Father website or the Big Bear Film Festival? Is there something else to research or look into?
We have quite a lot of material on our Facebook page, and some of those previous conversations about the film that have been recorded are there. And so that's a great place if you want to dig in a little more to hear other people's comments, those sorts of things about the film.
Very good.
That's
Yeah,
a very good place.
and my timer is saying I got 3 minutes and 22 seconds, but I want to share a story on my end. Under the Tower Productions, ironically, what happened was at a younger age, my grandfather had Alzheimer's, and he started walking around, and the cops would bring him back, and they're like, somebody needs to live with him. We need to figure out how to transition him. Well, he lived under a water tower, and the funding that from the nurse paying standpoint, I would use that to get the production going of my own production. What was interesting because 3 a.m. We would get up, or he would just have to be motivated to go walk some random place for some random thing. He would act more like a child, and he would see me as and I would see things that I've never saw growing up because his guard was down, and now he was back in the teen mode and not into I'm the grandfather. I'm going to tell you what's going on. And he was like, we got pulled over by the cops for some odd reason. And he was like, oh no. And I'm like, oh, I got to hide this. I'm like, hide what? What are you doing? And it was a can of root beer. He thought it was actual beer. And I'm like, oh really? So this must have been something that was going on back in the years and years ago. And it was just interesting to see these little nuances that came out. So anyway, I wanted to share that little story with you because it is interesting with family and transition and the back and forth as we all get older and progress into the new age of technology. The thing that I'm kind of concerned about is now my kids are going to be able to see messages and emails and have way more information. Like, this is who my dad was dating at this time, and things like that are starting to come out. I know it was amazing to see the young picture of your dad, Urban, to finally see him, and that picture was like the best, and it brought everything for me to say, wow, that's the kid that this happened to. And started this huge chain he never knew what progressed after this. So very good. Well, if you haven't seen it, people that are watching, please go and watch Father Unknown. Or no, it's Unknown Father. Sorry.
No, it's Father Unknown.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, Father Unknown. Yep.
Very good.
Thanks for having us. Great to chat with you.
Awesome.
Logan,
Urban.
thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very, very much.
All right. Thank you guys. I can't wait to see more. All right. We'll see you then.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.